Maryland basketball suffers a heartbreaking loss against Michigan State.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you guys for making us part of your day. And I'm also doing work at Inside Black and Gold. So make sure you guys head over to insideblackandgold.net for all your latest Terps news. Maryland basketball absolutely suffers a heartbreaking loss against Michigan State last night. It was the biggest game of the year for the Terps. The atmosphere was absolutely insane. I have never seen this, obviously this season, but in a long time, I have not seen an atmosphere like that at College Park. And everyone knows when Maryland basketball is at its best, when Maryland basketball is really good, they can draw big crowds. It's a basketball school. The student section will get going, as you saw last night, and that was a really cool atmosphere to look at for Maryland basketball. And that's part of the reason why this loss was so heartbreaking, because the students obviously put their all into that game. They did everything and more for what I think a lot of the players wanted, from a lot of the Maryland basketball coaches. From that kind of perspective, they obviously want a really cool environment. And Maryland students and Maryland fans really made up a cool environment for the Terps. You wish it was like that every single game, but that's not how these things work. People are going to show up for the big boys. People are going to show up for the big game. And that's exactly what this game was. It was the biggest game of the season. I said it yesterday. I thought that this game was going to kind of decide how the rest of the season goes in a way. And I think taking that loss definitely hurts. I definitely think you can rebound. It's not the end all be all. You're going to lose in college basketball, but it was the biggest game of the year for the Terps, and I think that's why it was so heartbreaking. It kind of put us in a not a it's we're obviously still in a really good spot, is what I'm trying to say. We're in a good spot. Things aren't over. It's not the end of the world, but losing that game did hurt our season overall. And of course, the Terps loss to Michigan State on that half-court buzzer beater, 58-55, a tough way to lose the game. Crazy shot by Michigan State. You just don't see plays like that happen very much. As he shot the ball, I had a weird feeling that something crazy was going to happen. I'm not going to say I thought it was going to go in, but for the Terps to lose like that, it's heartbreaking. It hurts. It definitely sucks for all the Maryland fans. And watching that shot, it was pretty amazing that Michigan State was able to do that. But to lose on a half-court buzzer beater like that, that's not something you expect to happen. That's not something you think is going to happen. Maryland was able to fight their way back into the game, and I didn't think that the Terps had that in them leading that game. I didn't think we were going to have enough offense in us. I didn't think we'd be able to really get ourselves in position to actually win the game. We were down by like 7 with 2 minutes left, and we figured out a way to tie it up and have the ball for a chance for a last-second shot. And I think that's why it really sucks, because Maryland wasn't supposed to win that game. They weren't. Tom Izzo was right. If you heard Tom Izzo's press conference after or his talk with the media person right after that game, you guys know the on-court kind of press conference thing, the interviews that they do right after. Tom Izzo made a really interesting point because he said that was a lucky shot, but that was not a lucky win, basically is what Tom Izzo said. And I agree. Maryland didn't deserve to win that game. They didn't deserve to win that game. And I agree with Tom Izzo that, yes, Michigan State hit a lucky shot to win, but that wasn't a lucky win for Michigan State. And yes, the loss sucks, but that wasn't a lucky win for Michigan State. A lot of people are starting to say, I've seen Maryland Instagram people, Maryland, who post about Maryland football, basketball stuff, and saying that we've been one of the most unlucky teams. And yeah, teams have hit buzzer beaters on us Teams have hit last second shots and it feels like we're unlucky, but that game, that's not what that was. Yes, we had yes, they hit a really tough shot at the end, but they were up by 7 with 2 minutes left. They tried to give us the game. And we had every opportunity to be able to win that. And even you could argue the calls were so that Michigan State had some questionable calls on them down the stretch. And it wasn't like, oh, Michigan State steals a lucky one from Maryland. It was really going to be the opposite. Maryland steals a lucky one from Michigan State. They outplayed us the entire game, and we're going to talk a lot about that shot. That's what's going to be on Instagram. That's what people are going to talk about. They're going to be like, this is March. This is college basketball. It's starting to become that time where crazy things happen. But how the game was executed down the stretch was poor, and that's why this loss hurts, and this loss is heartbreaking because Maryland should not have lost that game in regulation. I'll say that. If they lost in overtime, that's a different story. But they should not have lost that game in overtime. That's why or in regulation. That's why this loss stinks, is because Maryland had the opportunity, and you guys know what I'm talking about. That last shot by Jacoby Gillespie, you can't leave time on the clock for the other team to get a shot up. You can't. The worst case scenario in that situation for Maryland basketball, which I know this is just basketball 101, when you're playing high school, college, whatever level, 8th grade basketball, this is what it is in basketball. If you're going to shoot, if you have the last shot, the worst thing that can happen when you have the last shot is the worst case scenario that can happen is that you miss a shot, but the time runs out. That should be the worst case scenario of what happens in that situation. That should have been the worst scenario that happened. But that's not what happened. Jacoby Gillespie took a shot, and there was still, 2 seconds left? Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. I don't know exactly what it was, but there was still time on the clock when Jacoby Gillespie's shot missed, and that allowed Michigan State to hit the half-court buzzer. And that's the reason this loss is so bad, and it hurts the Terps, is I kind of go through it both ways, where I said, at the end of the game, you have to be able to execute that. And if Michigan State's going to give you a game on a silver platter where they were better than you for the entire second half, they were better than you for a lot of the game, and they're handing you that game on a plate, you have to know that you're going to take the last second shot. You have to know that, and Jacoby Gillespie has to know that. And that's why some of the situational stuff at the end of the games is so important. And Maryland hasn't been great at them for a lot of the season. I feel like on the road is when it's been really bad, and I feel like at home it's always been pretty solid. But last night was a case scenario where the moment was a scenario where the moment was a little bit too big for Gillespie in a way where he didn't execute overall. And I have a problem with that part of the game where he took a shot too early. You just can't do that. Like, we rather you not get a shot off than take a shot too early. Maybe I won't say that, because that was a lucky shot, and you do want them to get off a shot, but you just can't allow the amount of time. It was too much time. It was time for them to get it to about half court. It was just too much time for the Terps. And then also, another reason, I'm not putting this whole loss on Gillespie, but another reason this loss stunk was because it wasn't a good shot. I'd rather see you drive to the rim, get something going downhill, try and get to your floater, instead of taking a pull-up three, a tough, deep pull-up three, where this entire game, we shot the ball really poorly. We were not able to make threes. We weren't shooting the three ball well, and neither was Michigan State, but we shot 20% from the three-point arc. And Gillespie decides that it's a good time to pull up. Like, let's get to the rim. Let's get downhill. I think that was the way to go. And he had been to the free throw line 11 times that game. So getting downhill, getting to the rim really could have helped, or he hadn't made a three all game. And so I know sometimes you get caught up in the moment and putting up a shot, but to me, that just wasn't a good shot. That wasn't the best way to go about it. And it's definitely a really tough loss. And I think another reason it was a bad loss for Maryland and it's tough kind of one to swallow is because Michigan State didn't play that great. They didn't play that great. They played good defensively. I'll give them that. They played pretty good defensively. But offensively, this Michigan State team wasn't good last night. They weren't good. They were better in the second half a little bit, but they weren't that good themselves, and neither was Maryland. But Michigan State, this was a game where if you would have said Michigan State only scores 58, I would have said Maryland has a really good shot at winning with how our offense has been playing, but it's just not how it ended up going down. But Michigan State didn't play that great, and so it did feel like this was absolutely a game that Maryland could have won, should have won if they shot the ball better. It's not like Michigan State's been great offensively all year. They haven't. And the broadcast talked about how Maryland's been the best team in terms of points per game in the Big Ten this year, and it just didn't show last night. So give credit to Tom Izzo and Michigan State. But this loss kind of stinks, and it also it takes us out of the race for the Big Ten. We're not going to be able to get that a number one seed in the Big Ten, and now we got to fight for the double bye, which I think is really important. We don't want to play an extra game in the Big Ten tournament that we don't have to, and so now Maryland really has to battle for that double bye. Where if they got that win last night in a game where you could argue Maryland should have won, they definitely would have built themselves in a really good spot. And now you really got to win games on the stretch, which you would have had to do anyway. But you would have been in a much better spot for that double bye. And if you would have won that game, you would have had a chance to win the conference. But now that opportunity is kind of gone. Let's dive deeper into the game. What went wrong specifically? Who played bad? Is this something we should be concerned about? We'll talk about that next. Attention Locked On Terps fans, the future of college sports is here and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happen under the table and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. Now with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support your Maryland athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NLI app allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. The best part is if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control, no more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent and factual support and help shape the team in the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now with the App Store and start backing up your Maryland athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. So I want to talk a little bit more about this loss. I just want to first start off by saying I didn't think Maryland played well. And I think that's a mark of a good team. Not playing well against what is Michigan State, the 8th ranked team in the country, and still having an opportunity to win that game, I think is really big time for Maryland basketball. And I think that's something that you have to account for. I know Michigan State didn't have their best game, but still, I thought Maryland was outplayed in a lot of different spots, and they still had every opportunity to win that game, which I think is huge for Maryland to show that we're a good team that can win even when we don't have our best games. And Willard said it at halftime. If you guys listen to his on-court little interview thing at halftime, he said sometimes it's pretty and sometimes you're going to have things going, but sometimes you just got to grit it out. And this Maryland team was really close to gritting it out, but that didn't end up happening. And to me, the biggest reason for the loss wasn't actually that last second play. It wasn't. Maryland got out-rebounded badly on the offensive glass. Michigan State killed us rebounding, killed us. And we know this from the Tom Izzo team. They're going to rebound the ball at a really high level. But specifically on the offensive glass, they absolutely killed Maryland. And I think was the biggest reason we lose that game. If Michigan State doesn't have all the offensive rebounds that they get, they don't win. They had 13 offensive rebounds. 13. That is a lot. They out-rebounded us 45-33, 12 more rebounds than us. Maryland had 4 offensive rebounds compared to 13 for Michigan State. That's just not good enough. That's way too many more possessions for Michigan State. That's way too many more opportunities for them to score, for them to get another opportunity on the offensive side of things. You can't get out-rebounded like that. You can't allow that many offensive rebounds. It's just not going to work. It's not a formula for success. And for a Michigan State team that wasn't playing that good offensively, that was a way to keep them going at least a little bit offensively. For a team that shot 26% from the three-point arc, 33% from the field, that kind of kept them, I don't want to say in the game, but that kept them with control of the game, and that's really frustrating for the Terps to get out-rebounded like that when we know that's a huge part of Tom Izzo and what they do is offensive boards. To me, that just wasn't good enough for the Terps. And then I just thought we didn't get the production out of our starting 5 that we usually get. For one, we just didn't shoot the ball well. Sometimes it's really that simple. If we shoot the ball better, we probably win that game. Like sometimes you overcomplicate it a little bit and it's like this and that. But sometimes it really comes down to how you're shooting the ball and different things like that. And Maryland didn't shoot the ball well. It's really that simple. They didn't shoot the ball well at all. And when you look at it, Rodney Rice is the only guy to make a 3 on our team. Jacoby Gillespie took 6, went 0 for 6, which is tough. Derek Queen took 2 threes, which I just don't like. Derek Queen shouldn't be taking threes right now. 0 for 2 from the three-point arc. Celton Miguel was 0 for 3. Deshaun Harris-Smith took 1, 0 for 1. So we shot 20%, 420, and they were all Rodney Rice, who made 4 of 8, who I thought had by far the best game out of any Terp. I thought he played well, and he's been really consistent for us. But if you don't shoot the ball well, you're not going to win the game against the Michigan State team. And Michigan State did some good stuff on defense, but I still think at the end of the day, a lot of it came down to Maryland just missing a lot of shots. And I thought that part of the game was definitely tough. And then Julian Reese and Derek Queen can't combine for 6 turnovers. That's just too many for your big men to have. That just can't happen. As well as Julian Reese didn't have a good game. I thought we could have gotten him the ball down low way more in the game. He was 2 of 7 from the field, 4 points. It's just not good enough for Julian Reese. Same with Derek Queen. I thought like at a certain point we were kind of giving it to Gillespie and Rice a little too much. And I was like, why aren't we just running this through post up every single time with Reese and Queen? And if they double, someone's going to be open, and that helps you force a rotation on the defensive side of things. I just didn't think we went to them enough. And Derek Queen, too, didn't have a good game. 2 of 11 from the field, 6 of 9 from the free throw line. He ended up having a double-double, 10 rebounds, 10 points, but just not his best game. And if those guys are going to combine for 4 of 18, you're going to have a really tough go at it and really tough. It's going to be really tough to win the game. And then Celton Miguel, I thought he had flashes of playing really well when he was in there, but he had foul trouble early, which really made it tough for us in the first half. Just having him to be able to space the floor compared to, no offense to Deshaun Harris-Smith, but he just struggles shooting the ball and offensively. And Miguel gives us another scoring option in there. And him being in foul trouble, it was tough kind of to get everything going with him in foul trouble, which is part of the reason I'm concerned about some of our depth problems. But those were kind of the reasons I saw we lost the game. We'll talk about it more tomorrow if it's a continuous thing or we really have to worry about that. But that's what I saw last night against Michigan State. What's next for the Terps? What should we be looking at next? We'll talk about that next. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online, right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. As a parent, I want to make sure my family is financially protected no matter what happens when I am a parent. And Fabric gives you that peace of mind. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones that doesn't have to break the bank is important. So join the thousands of parents who chose Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just a minute at meetfabrics.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabrics.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, now available in certain states. Price subject to underwriting and health questions. Do have to mention Fabric. So don't position yourself not to use Fabric. So make sure you guys head over to Fabric right now. So what's next for the Terps after this loss? I think the biggest thing that hurts is you kind of take away one thing that was a possibility if Maryland won that game. You're not going to get the Big Ten regular season title. And does that matter a ton? No. Is that something that is going to be the end of the world? Is that something that is really going to hurt you? No. You don't really remember those. You remember the Big Ten tournament. You remember March Madness. And now we're not going to be able to be a team that wins the Big Ten regular season title. But to me, that's not the end of the world. It kind of sucks. It kind of stinks, but it's definitely not the end of the world. But when you look at things now, I think what's next for the Terps, you got to battle for this top 4 seeding in the Big Ten tournament. You're right there. Right now, you're tied with UCLA, but we have the head-to-head over UCLA. Wisconsin jumped us last night just because we took another loss, but you can easily catch up to Wisconsin. You have the head-to-head over them as well, which I think is important for the Terps. And then Purdue's also 11-6, and they have the head-to-head over us. So I think it's a 3-way kind of weird tie going on. But I think for me, I don't really want the Terps. Not me, but I don't want to see them play an extra game in the Big Ten tournament. And that's when it starts to really ramp up and you're in March settings. And you know what happens in March? Literally anything can happen. You don't want Maryland to lose to Iowa all of a sudden in the first round of the Big Ten tournament because they didn't have a double bye or something like that. You want to set yourself up to be in the Big Ten championship and get a higher seed in the March Madness, which I think is really important for the Terps. And I'm going to go back to the Michigan State game. I think to me, you can't make this like an end of the world, or this can't pile into another loss. You know what I mean? This can't turn into something that just happens now. You took a bad loss to Michigan State. It sucks, but it can't be all of a sudden our offense is inefficient. All of a sudden our offense is like last year's. All of a sudden it's not good enough. That's not what can happen. It can't pile onto each other, and you got to find your rhythm back again, because if you let this kind of pile and you let this domino effect into the next game, you're going to be a team that does the opposite of what we want to do. You're going to be a team that slumps in March instead of is at their top of their game during March Madness and peaks during March. You don't want to be a slumper during March, because there are those teams that squeak into the tournament, that get in, but they're on a slump and they get upset early on. And to me, you can't let it do that, because I thought Maryland, if anyone watched the game, I thought Maryland was the better team. I thought their players didn't play their best game, but I think Maryland was still better than that Michigan State team. It didn't end up happening like that. And then also, you do have a game this weekend to look forward to, which is going to be a big game Saturday. Penn State, that's one where you should just win. It's on the road, but it's a game you should win. And then Wednesday, you have a huge one against Michigan on the road to look forward to, a chance to get another ranked win, a huge resume builder, which I think is really important. So to me, what's next after this loss, it kind of feels like a huge one. It feels bigger than a lot of the other ones. And it's definitely not the end of the world. You're still fighting for a top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament. You're still fighting for some of these other things, and I think that's important. March Madness resume, obviously. And you want to keep stacking wins, and you don't want to let this pile. Watch the film, figure out what went wrong. Get some shooting practice in for next game, but let's not overthink this thing. This Maryland team is still really good. There are problems that kind of Michigan State showed for the Terps, some of the scary stuff that I've been thinking in my mind, but we'll talk about that more tomorrow. That's all we have for today. Thank you guys for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball, So thank you guys for listening to Locked On Terps.